Assassin's Creed Mirage is right around the corner. For those of you that don't know, Mirage is the next installment in the Assassin's Creed series. The game centers around Basim from Valhalla's origin story as he grew up and became an assassin, along with his struggle of personalities, Basim against Loki in 9th century Baghdad. As of recording, we are in a strange time. It's been almost half a year since the game was announced via a cinematic CGI trailer, and if we're lucky, we're about 6 months until the game's release. But this is why it's a weird one. We haven't seen any gameplay yet. Where's the gameplay? We don't know. Now, the reason for a lack of any more story trailers, in-engine trailers, gameplay trailers, or anything of the sorts might be due to Ubisoft's current ongoing sales issues. Their game sales are underperforming, they are losing investors, and they are losing money. So we'll cut them a bit of slack and say maybe they're trying to figure out a good plan for Assassin's Creed Mirage to get themselves back on their feet, and that's why we haven't seen any gameplay yet. So far we've only seen a reveal trailer, and that sparks a lot of debate, a lot of questions, a lot of speculation, and a lot of predictions. Just based off of the information we know about the game being an Assassin's Creed returning to its roots, or so they say. We're going back to an action adventure. There's no longer going to be RPG aspects. We are once again playing as an assassin in an Assassin's Creed story. From that information, from the reveal trailer, I have made a few predictions. Now, my predictions for Assassin's Creed Mirage cover gameplay, graphics, open world, story, game length, microtransactions, customization, and much more. The aim of this video is to give you guys a clearer idea of what Assassin's Creed Mirage could indeed be. My predictions are based off of prior Ubisoft games and the way the company usually works, along with what we've seen in the Assassin's Creed series before and looking at the direction they want to take their games in the future. The idea with these predictions is pretty simple. It's to see if when the game comes out, was I right, was I wrong, where was I right, where was I wrong, was I a mix of both, and more. I'm not saying what I predict in this video is going to be gospel. It's definitely going to happen and you're wrong or I'm right or blah blah blah. I'm not talking about that. These are predictions. I could throw my hands up in the air and say that I was completely wrong if I turn out to be wrong. And if I'm right, I'll say, hey, I was right. That's basically all there is to it. And of course, we can all get a conversation going in the comments on your predictions as well. Now, this video is an edited supercut version of my most recent live stream of Renaissance Radio Episode 3, a podcast where we talk mainly about Assassin's Creed and some other fun things here and there. So if you do enjoy this video and want to learn more about my predictions and see me go in much more depth, then the link for that podcast episode will be on the end screen of this video and in the description. So without further ado, I will leave you guys to my past self and yeah, enjoy. Subscribe if you're new and you want to see much more to do with Assassin's Creed Mirage and stay in the loop. Take care and enjoy. Gameplay is going to be a mix of the old and new. It's going to play similar to the older games, but when I say older games, not the proper OG games, more kind of Unity, Syndicate style of gameplay, with stealth, blending with the crowds, hiding in the hay, sitting on benches, but then as I said, normal stealth is obviously, you know, sneaking. I think sneaking and looking behind corners and stuff is going to be kind of like it was in Syndicate. I think that makes a lot of sense if they're going to try and bring back what people wanted or what people enjoyed from the older games. When it comes to mixing with the new, combat is just going to be Valhalla combat pretty much, you know. You might get some daggers and you'll start going... I think if you had swords, you're just going to slash in the same animations. It's going to play in a very similar way. The difference being that there probably won't be XP points flashing on the screen and stuff like that, because this one, so far as we know, isn't going to be an RPG. It's going to be more like the older games, an action adventure. So I think it's going to be a mix of the old and the new with that stuff. Like newer combat styles like Valhalla, like Odyssey, without probably the power-ups and stuff. I don't think they'll have that just because, again, it's not being an RPG from what we know. I think there'll be no skill trees, which means there'll be no unlocking, you know, super kick, chop the head off, throw a ton of axes out of nowhere. But I don't think that will be in the game, and I think that will be for the best. I do think we will get Unity-style parkour. Whether you say that's good or bad, yes, very floaty. Yes, you don't get much control, but it looks good. good and it feels satisfying. And if that's what we get, I'm not complaining. That is what people say is the gold standard of Assassin's Creed parkour. I don't think there is a gold standard or anything like that. My personal favorite was the Ezio Collection parkour because you had much more control. You had to use your mind a lot more to think, where am I going to climb next? How am I going to do this? Where Unity's was a lot more, it looked good, it felt good, but there was less control. It was more of a ways to fly across the rooftops of the city, where the older games were more of like a puzzle and a bit more platformy, I suppose you could say. So I think it would be more like Unity's when it comes to parkour in Mirage. Ubisoft have always been really detailed, really intricate, and really creative with their in-game worlds. And you can say what you will about like Odyssey, for example, it being an empty game, not much to do, boring stuff, blah, 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 blah. But the world was very beautiful. It was very beautiful, and I feel like the world designers have always done an amazing job. Baghdad is going to be a really, I don't know about accurate, but a really detailed representation of Baghdad. Very reminiscent of kind of Revelations, kind of the first game. In aesthetic, it will be around the same size as Unity Paris, or you could say London Syndicate. You know, it's a big city to explore. There's going to be a ton of viewpoints. I think it's going to be very jam-packed, I think the city will be. Alleyways to go down, to hide around corners. There'll be big open spaces as well, like in the more richer districts, but I think in general it's going to be a very claustrophobic city to explore. It will become maybe fairly iconic as an Assassin's Creed location. I think it would also, though, potentially not have much to do in the city. Now, the only reason I say this is because they've mentioned focusing on the main narrative, the main story, you know, going back to its roots, so they say. Mirage, again, is going to focus on their main story and making the world amazing. I think they might potentially also, again, neglect side content. I wouldn't say that's necessarily a bad thing if the main story is really good, the world's really good, but I feel like, you know, there won't be as many activities to do within the world. Maybe there'll be a few collectibles to find throughout the world, maybe similar to the Ishak Pasha, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, pages in Revelations, or the flags in AC1, or the feathers in AC2, viewpoints as well, but I feel apart from that, there might not be much to do. I don't think there'll be many scripted and, you know, story-filled side quests. I could be wrong, but this is my prediction. I predict there will be microtransactions within Assassin's Creed Mirage. I don't think they've specifically come out and literally said we're not going to have microtransactions, and even if they have, that can be subject to change, you know? But I do think they will have microtransactions such as cosmetic items. Maybe there's an extra robe for Basim that you can't really get in the game, but you can buy it for $3.99. If you really love those fantasy aspects of Odyssey and Valhalla, you can buy a flaming sword in the Helix store for $2.99, and what that will do is it will light every weapon you use on fire, or it'll give you a specific one. You know, I feel like that stuff is still going to be in the game. I don't know whether it was leaked or officially revealed. That Prince of Persia pre-order pack or something like that, and there was a mount, a demon-looking mount in the game. Ubisoft saying there won't be microtransactions in the game originally, or alluding to that at least, doesn't really stand now that we are hearing about investors pulling out, sales dropping, having to cut back on their budget by cancelling games to try and save money and keep themselves kind of leveled financially. When they release their most popular game in the series, and they might not be having another one for a couple years at least, Mirage will be too good of an opportunity to pass up with microtransactions. I believe it will be an Assassin's Creed story. I do believe it will be focused around the hidden ones, focused around Basim's struggle with him and his reincarnated persona as Loki, and the battle between personalities. Who am I really? But let's talk about Assassin's Creed as a story. I personally think it will go back to, you know, you are an assassin, you are fighting, you are the Templars or the Order of Ancients involved in trying to liberate the city, perhaps. I don't think they will get a true telling of what an Assassin's Creed story is. What made an Assassin's Creed story to begin with was a lot to do with the philosophy of the creed. What does it mean to be an assassin, but more, what does it mean to believe what you believe, and why are you fighting? You know, for what reasons are you fighting this fight? Are you the good guys, or are you really the bad guys? Like, it was all a matter of perception, and it was a battle of ideology more than it was a battle for victory, you know, between the Templars and the Assassins. It was also the main protagonist's journey within that creed. You know, you'd start as somebody young within the Order, maybe you would have your own dilemmas, your own beliefs on things, and it was a story about how maybe your own beliefs can contradict the creed, and maybe how you take the beliefs of the creed or the tenets of the creed and apply them in your own unique way. You know, that was an Assassin's Creed game. And then you'd have the history stuff kind of as a backdrop. You'd have the assassin versus Templars, the ideologies, the philosophy, that was what I was going for. And then you'd have the history, the historical characters, the world, you know, that sort of thing. It was a backdrop. With the most recent games, they lost kind of their identity with that. It was more about history. History is the most important thing. And then they put everything else as a backdrop. They kind of reversed it. Perfect example, Valhalla. History, Vikings, being in that history was the main selling point, the main part of the game. The assassins was the backdrop. You know, you go to the assassin tombs, you can read about the philosophy of the assassins. But again, it was a small part of the game that you could easily just not do or not think about. With Assassin's Creed Mirage, I think there's a high chance that the writers thought, okay, we're going to make a story about assassins, but they might lack the understanding of the philosophy, the understanding, the debating, the war of belief. You know, I feel like they might kind of neglect that part of it, and they'll focus a lot more on Basim's struggle with him and his Isu reincarnated self. I think that will be more of the focus, and assassins will be more of the backdrop to that. The story will start as you being an assassin, and maybe that will be the main focus for a while, but again, it will be the backdrop to Basim and his split personality. And then as the game goes on, it will focus less on the assassins and more as Basim and Loki, and then it will kind of go into more Isu territory as he learns more, has more visions, maybe gets into the acquirement of a piece of Eden, which teaches him more. I think it will lose more sort of vision from the assassins, and it will focus more on, again, that fantastical stuff. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'd love to see a good story, good writing about Basim's confliction. That can be done really well, and I believe it can be. I don't want it, again, to lose its identity from what makes Assassin's Creed. You know, you can focus more on a character and, you know, his traits more than you do the philosophy of the Assassin's Creed, and I wouldn't say that's technically bad. Again, it's how you do it. You know, you don't want to neglect the assassin order within an Assassin's Creed game. You don't want to throw it away or forget about it. The story should be written in such a way, the characters should be written in such a way that the character's journey, whether it's to do with the order or not, always ties back in to the assassin tenets, the assassin order, the philosophy. For an example, Ezio's journey was all about revenge. It was retribution, avenging his family for their death, for their murder by the Templars. Now, what I think would be quite good writing to accommodate the assassin order as well as Basim's progression is, let's say, the more Basim learns about his past self being Loki, he learns that through the guidance of his mentors within the assassin order. Maybe he has moments of relapse where he starts to become more an evil sort of Loki, but then the assassin tenets come back into play, his mentors come back into play, maybe politics of the order and the fights they are in come into play, and he starts to be a bit more grounded, a bit more brought back to who he really is, Basim. There's character development while also being very intertwined in an assassin story and the philosophy of such a thing. Basim's back and forth with him and Loki could coincide very nicely with the philosophy of the creed. The back and forth between what it means to be at peace, to have peace. The back and forth between peace and war. But my overall prediction is that the writers might not take into account the philosophy of the creed and how it can intertwine with Basim's character development, and I think it will solely start to deviate more away from the assassin order, the assassin fight with the Templars, and start to lean more heavily on, as I said earlier, the Isu, Loki, who is he, the fight between those two characters, and we start to forget about the assassin order. So, back to present day Exile again, I'm back. Those are my predictions for Assassin's Creed Mirage. Now, there are a few more obscure predictions I had within the live stream itself that we go into in more detail over there. So if you want to check out the full podcast episode, that will be in the lives tab of my channel, linked in the description as well and on the end screen, or you can listen to it on Spotify, again, linked in the description. As I said at the beginning of this video, I want to hear your guys' predictions. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Do you have your own predictions? Let's get a discussion going in the comments. And if you did enjoy this video and you want to stay up to date with everything everything Assassin's Creed Mirage, especially leading up to the release of the game, then press the subscribe button so you don't miss a thing. I love you guys. May the Father of Understanding guide us. I will see you soon. Goodbye.